Okay, yesterday we were talking again about names. Okay, so we learned, the last thing we're discussing is that years ago, names were given based on incidents or places or whatever. Now, the minute is people call after relatives or their rebbes or their tzaddikim and things like that. Now, there is we said Svardim have a minute that they do name after living grandparents. And by them it's a very big honor. Ashkenazim don't. What happens if... this is what this opinion holds. Most people disagree with it. What happens if somebody wants to... The father has two names, and they want to give a kid one of the two names. So then some people write, there's not a problem with it, because you're not giving it the same name. But in Irish circles, Ashkenazic circles, generally that's not done. Even if a father has two names, you're not going to give a kid one of those two names. Some people have a minig to call the names after their rebbes. There's a letter from the rebbe that it's brought down in halacha also, in customs. But you don't name a kid partially after a rebbe and after a parent or grandparent. Let's see, either after a rebbe or after a parent. Now, there's a whole discussion even in halacha. Let's say there's two grandparents. Can I name the kid after both grandparents? Let's say one's called Avram and one's called Yitzchak. So can I call Avram Yitzchak? Yeah. So some people question about doing it, but the fact is, the custom is that people do it, and they do name after two grandparents. Now, there's another halacha there's a custom, these are all customs by the way, not necessarily, but a custom mentioned in halacha. Many people have a custom that if somebody died very young or tragic, they won't name the person after that person that died young or tragic, unless if it's a parent, or many times they'll add an additional name. They won't just call him that name. Let's say, God forbid, the one that passed away was Avram, so they're not going to call the baby only Avram, they would call him Avram Yitzchak or something Avram or whatever it is.
Should that be the second name?
It doesn't matter which one it is. Yeah. Yes. Some people say, by the way, that if you name a kid after two grandparents, two different people, you should make sure you call the kid by both names. Which is also not necessarily done in the... Huh? If they get along, yeah. No. Huh? No, okay, so if then, one parent's Levi, one parent's Yitzchak, so you call Levi, you could make sure to call him Levi Yitzchak. But how there are certain people that are strict, most people are not, but there are certain people that are strict, that if a kid has two names, they will always call him by both names. They will always call them by two names. In fact, the Rebbe Rashab, the fifth Rebbe, always called his son, his name was Yosef Yitzchak. He always called him Yosef Yitzchak. He was never, not in the sichas, not in orally, he always called him Yosef Yitzchak with both names. So some people, such a minute get brought down and also, yeah.
Is it recommended to just name one name or two names or three names?
I tell you, it's not a problem one name or two names. If you name a kid with a lot of names, then when they pass away after 120, the kids are going to learn Mishnayos for them on the yard side. There's a lot of chapters in Mishnayos to learn. Just have future Achmanis on the kid. There are people that have one name, two names, three names. The highest of the, again, we said the prophecy of the name is that's the lifeline of the person. Some lifelines are with one name, some lifelines are with two names, or three names, whatever. But the Rebbe writes in letters, you shouldn't mix Rebbe's names with non-Rebbe names. They bring down also in halacha, you shouldn't call a tzaddik's name, it's brought down in many places. You don't call a Rebbe's name, a tzaddik's name with a parent name. It's two different issues. You name after a parent, it's after a parent. If it's after a Rebbe, you name it after a Rebbe. Huh? It's interesting, by Rebbe's names you can't tell. The Rebbe Rashab, his name was Shalom Dave Ber. Right? Shalom was after the Tzemach Tzedek's father, Shalom Shachner. And Dave Ber was after the Mittel Rebbe. Okay, so Shalom Dave Ber is really after non-Rebbe and a Rebbe. But again, Rebbe's stories are different. That doesn't mean that you... the Rebbe writes clear in the letter, you don't combine Rebbe names with...
Maybe the Rebbe can name his son like this.
Yeah, it's a whole different story.
That's
What?
if you're naming it after the Rebbe himself. If you're naming it just with the name, not necessarily after the tzaddik, would you make
Then you can mix names together. You can name whatever you want. You don't have to name somebody after people that passed away. I told you, in today's world, all these modern names popping up for boys and girls that never existed before. They're not naming them after anybody. Okay, it's also a custom that you don't name after a person's a real bad Russia. Okay? Unless there's certain conditions. If he did tshuva, it's not a problem. It's not really the name of the Russia. There he had different names, or if it's a parent, then they says, even if it's a parent or a relative, even if they were wicked, I'm not talking about wicked, a person who grew up didn't know anything about Yiddishkeit and therefore they weren't religious. I'm talking about a person who was an active Russia, So if it's a parent, even then you could still name the name after the parent, even though he was not that religious at all. What?
Somebody who died young with a sickness or car accident. Some people don't name after them, but we do.
Where were you when I just spoke about it?
I know, I didn't hear it myself.
It was David.
I said some people that want to do it, they'll add a name to it. If it's a parent, they'll name him even if he died young. Okay, it's just the next thing over here. If it's a tzaddik, you can call the name even if the tzaddik passed away young. If it's a parent, you can call them even if they died young. Only some people say it's only if he was killed. But if he just died, illness, you do name him. There's a lot of, if it's something al Kiddush Hashem, somebody died by the Holocaust or now in this battles in Israel, whatever. So people that are Kadeshim, so then you could name. Yeah. One second. What? I know. So we said we were talking about that yesterday. I don't know. Yishmael Kohen Gadol. By the way, Rashi says in Chumash, and from the Medrash, that Yishmael did tshuva. So Yishmael did tshuva at the end of his life. And it says clearly in halacha that if the person did tshuva, then it's not an issue naming him after Russia. So Yishmael did tshuva. Esav didn't do tshuva. Because when Avram died, it says, who buried him? Yitzchak v'Yishmael Banov. First Yitzchak and Yishmael. So even though Yishmael was older, right, he allowed Yitzchak to go first. That means we can't trust the tshuva. So Rashi calls to the matter. So he did tshuva, so therefore it's not a problem naming it after that person.
What is it with Nimrod?
I told you, people wouldn't, it's not a proper thing to name a guy Nimrod. But somebody the other day just mentioned that the guy changed his name from Nimrod to Avram. Alexander. That wasn't only a Goyish name. Alexander was a Yiddish name also.
Huh?
No.
That was because of Alexander the Great.
Before Alexander became the Alexander of the Great, they were naming people Alexander.
I don't know. How would people name after such a Goyish king?
There's a story with him. He came to the Yeshua Kohen Gadol, and he wanted to put a statue of himself in the
Shimon HaTzadik.
Shimon HaTzadik.
Not
He
Yeshua
wanted to put
king.
a statue, and he said, we better will name our kids Alexander. And all the kids that were born that year.
Okay, there could be. Okay. Couldn't have been Shimon HaTzadik. It could have had to be Shimon HaTzadik because the whole story of Alexander, he bowed down to Shimon HaTzadik. He said he saw him in his dreams whenever he went to war. Okay, yeah, you know what? It's ringing a bell now, that story. but there is. But normally you don't name, nobody's going to name their kid Hitler, Yimach Shmei, or Arafat, or...
Not even Adolf.
By the way, there's a lot of Jews that have their English name is Adolf.
Before the war.
No.
After the war?
And my father's shul survivors.
Right, they were born before he was Hitler.
No. There were people afterwards also.
So how does it work? The Goy, everyone named him after, it's like naming people after Trump, because he was a good president.
Trump is a good president.
Whatever,
Depends who you
I'm
ask.
saying It's the, how do you determine one that they can name after a Goy and becomes Yiddish?
Here it says, "Asa likra l'shem lebnei arbituk shemes hagoyim," or to call him with the name of the goyim. But to take a goyish name and make it Hebrew, some people say the Rogatchover says you could do it.
What's your sentiments about a lot of Herzl that we have?
Herzl is an old name before Herzl was born. And Theodor Herzl, his first name wasn't Herzl, his last name was Herzl.
Is that right? I didn't know that.
What was Herzl's name?
Oh, Theodore. Theodore.
And Herzl was his last name. Last name don't mean anything. Okay, next. Some people will name after somebody. Okay, now there's another interesting thing. They bring down, some people have a minig. They won't name a kid the name before Avram Avinu. And they write, and Yashemim don't care about this, but the name Noach, they're calling it not for the Noach in Chumash, but the Noach, Nechama, whatever. But most people don't care about this. There's an interesting thing, by the way. I don't know what the source of the minig is, but there's a minig, God forbid, if there's a stillborn. So the din is, if it's a boy, you give it a bris and a name. And if it's a girl, you only give it a name, obviously. Yeah? So it says the names, I heard it, I didn't see it, but maybe I did see it, but I remember, but I heard it, that the minig is to give him names from before the Mabul time, before the flood. And the reason why you give a name to a stillborn, God forbid, is for Tchias HaMesim. Stillborns are going to get up, Tchias HaMesim. They'll need a name. Why up is before the, I don't know, but that's what
What about Gary? What name?
Who is this? Like whoever born in front?
Gary?
No, Gatum, pick a name, many times they'll pick Avram or whatever.
What name they give? Who they give those names from the mother?
Ask a doctor.
No, but
I never did a bris on a stillborn.
But
I never did a bris on anybody. That's me, if it bleeds, how am I supposed to? It's a question for the doctor, I don't know. Ask a male. Okay. No. No, you don't do it with you just do it with a knife. You don't do it with a male's knife. The guys just cut it. They don't need a bris. You just take off the oil. Huh? Again, it says you give it a bris. Anybody gives it a bris, not a moil. You don't need a tool and a moil with the. He just cuts it and they give it a name and they bury it. No brach. No brach, no nothing. They just cut it and cut the foreskin off, and it's for Tchias HaMesim, basically.
can a goy doctor do it?
The minig is a yid does it. Now, what happens? There's certain names that are boy names and girl names. Like a name Simcha, right? Simcha is a boy's name. Simcha is a girl's name. So it says, what happens if you have a boy and a girl? You want to name them both Simcha. Let's say you have twins. So you want to call them both Simcha, because Simcha boy, it's a boy's name. There's a bunch of names that are boys and girls' names. So then it says you shouldn't do it. Like the name of Simcha. Because then it's a little confusing. When you snitch on them that Simcha made problems, who are you going to talk? You don't know who you're talking about. But that's not the reason. Or what happens though, if you have, I'll give you another example. This is, what happens if you have an interpretation of a name. I'll give you an example. There's Yitzchak and there's Isaac. Now, generally speaking, Isaac is the Yiddish of Yitzchak. That's because in English it's Isaac, but there's a Yiddish name Isaac. So what happens if somebody has a name Yitzchak, and then they have a kid, can they name a kid Isaac, even though there's a name? So that says clearly that you're allowed to. I know a bunch of people, the grandfather was Yitzchak. In fact, there was an interesting story that there's a guy, people know who he is, he's not alive anymore, but he had his father was Yitzchak Isaac, and his father-in-law was Yitzchak. Now his father passed away, Yitzchak Isaac passed away. But he couldn't give his kid a name Yitzchak Isaac because the grandfather's name was Yitzchak, was still alive. So he named his kid Isaac. So it's still after his father was Yitzchak Isaac, and it was a different name. Isaac is one name and Yitzchak is a different name. So that you're able to do.
But when you call somebody Yitzchak, and because you live in America, they always calling him Isaac.
No.
Is that a problem, or it's considered the same name?
It's you're calling him his English name.
Yeah.
So why is it different when you call him the Torah? It's not Isaac, it's Yitzchak.
No, a guy that has a name Yitzchak Isaac, you call him Yitzchak Isaac. It's a second name. There's a name Isaac by itself. Usually it's like Dov Bear. Bear is Yiddish for Dov. Dov is a bear. Okay? So in Yiddish, a bear is called also Bear. So Dov Bear, some people have a name Dov. You can name a kid Bear because it's not the same name, even though it's really the same name. One's in Hebrew, one's in Yiddish. But then it doesn't matter.